Hello everyone, this is Stephen Gibson, and I am coming at you with another video about Outlaws in a Strange Land. In this video, I want to talk about condition cards. So we have our combat set up here, or pre-combat. What we have here. Oh, first of all, I know my keyboard's loud. I'm sorry. Nothing I can do about it right now. So we have our condition cards here. You always have your charge condition card, and same with this is the creature over here. Anyway, you're gonna have like a generic player card that's red, blue, purple, or I don't know, some other color. And on one side, it's pointing your condition cards go out here. For the creature, it goes out this way. As you add in condition cards, here is just this actually goes sideways. Just your stack of condition cards that aren't being used. And over here is your health tracker. Yeah, okay, so let's talk about conditions. Conditions were... it's my way of adding to the story of combat and making things feel, I don't know, believable and thematic. So in Grimslingers, you're basically just doing damage. You weren't doing much more than that. Sometimes you discard cards and stuff like that. I didn't find it very thematic outside of the flavor text, like the mechanics of it. So anyway, I went with a much more wanting to tell a story and playing into the theme and feeling like things were, I don't know, things how things should be. So here you have charges. Charges are like energy that builds up in you as you do certain skills. This is very common in video games. You use your basic attacks that power up your ultimate attacks, so this is a similar thing. So as you gain charges, and all the condition cards kind of work with spinning and flipping, they're all double-sided. So say I use my basic shoot a bullet skill, I get one charge from it. With that one charge, maybe I have a skill that needs one charge, or maybe I have a skill that's really powerful and needs 4 charges. So as I gain charges, I can unlock or perform more powerful abilities. That way I can give players really, really strong abilities that they can't just, rush into combat and blow everyone up in the first turn. But you can definitely work towards, like that super skill. So next up we have bleeding. Let me turn this off real quick. Next up we have bleeding. So I wanted to feel like if you shot somebody, well, they'd be bleeding. Or if you stab someone or something, so they're bleeding. That feels thematic. So we've got bleeding. And as I call them stacks, I don't know what board game people generally call them. But for me, in video games and MMOs, we call them stacks. So when like an effect is applied, you can stack that effect and it increases. So for bleeding, someone applies 1 stack of bleeding or 2 stacks of bleeding, all the way up to 4 stacks. And they're actually, these are damage over time abilities, DOTs, as they say in video games. And there's 3 different DOTs in the game. Here we go. So there's bleeding, which is kind of like, well, you know what bleeding is. So there's bleeding, there's poisoned, and there's draining. Draining is the magic one. And then poison as well. It's poisoned. And so these are these different stacks you can get. And they all work a little different. Like, bleeding starts off, you just take 1 damage, and then 2, and then 4, and then 8. So the more stacks of bleeding, it really increases the amount of damage you do. Whereas poisoned, so like bleeding starts off very weak, whereas poison starts off stronger. It starts with 2, then it goes to 3, then 4, then 6. So it goes up by, it goes 2 to 3, 4, and then 6 is the best thing. It just makes it a little more interesting. Each one functions a little differently, each stack it has. And then spirit damage is generally pretty weak, but it's really hard to get rid of. And this can be applied by spells and all kinds of stuff. So it just goes 1, 2, 3, 4. pretty straightforward. Bleeding is the most powerful because it goes 1, 2, 4, 8. Anyway, so that's bleeding and draining. And on your turn, when you start your turn, these effects are going to be applied to you from various sources. But at the start of your turn, you are then going to review your condition cards. I don't have it on the cards right now, but right now you can only have a max of 6 condition cards. I might take that away. It depends. I'm still fleshing out like how many you could get and have to keep track of. But there are also priorities to each condition card. So if you get a new condition and it has a lower priority than all of your conditions already have, it won't get applied. And that part's not thematic. It's merely I don't want to overwhelm players with too much. Like if you have like 15 condition cards, that's not very fun anymore to try and remember and keep track of all that stuff. So there are 15 condition cards. Creatures only have 13. And yeah, so you can have a max of 6, but let's keep going through them. So protected can be applied by spells and different things. It's basically increases your damage resistances. It makes you a little harder to kill. Evasion. You can do things that give you this evasion card, and it's basically like a get out of jail free. So you have your evasion thing, and at any time you can discard the card to just ignore an attack. We have weakened, and weakened, well, it weakens you, and it lowers all of your resistances and also your strength. So as you, I don't know, you get beat up a lot, you get weakened or whatever it may be, they break your bones, I don't know. Reload is certain gun skills will cause you to get the reload condition. So in order to use your gun anymore, you're gonna have to reload. I wanted to feel like you had ammo without it being a tedious thing to manage. So skills don't require ammo, but some skills, like if you fan the hammer, is going to give you the reload condition, stuff like that. So generally most gun skills are like 1 bullet, and it's just assumed that you're, reloading, adding more bullets in small doses. But if you use a lot of bullets at once, you'll get the reload condition. Then we've got, let's just pop this up here. We've got empowered. So this works very similar to Grimslingers, where there's a keyword or an abbreviation called NV, which is numerical value. So as you gain empowered stacks, it increases the NV of your skills, and it is applied as soon as you use a skill. So you can increase the power of your skills by gaining empowered from whatever source you do it. The revive timer, this is for multiplayer only, and it's similar to video games where when you die, there's a certain amount of time before you can come back to life in a multiplayer setting. And so essentially, when you get the revive timer, you get rid of all your other conditions, and you put the revive timer up, and then each turn you would spin it until you're eventually revived and come back. So that way there's no player elimination, but it takes you out of the combat for a little bit, and there are things players can do to speed up the revive timer for right now. And there's the elemental type abilities. So there's electric conductive, electric electrified. They do different things. So you could, I don't think the game works quite like this, but you could throw water on someone and then it makes them conductive. And so if any electric damage is done to them, they're going to take extra damage because they're conductive. Then they flip the card, and then now they're electrified, and it gives them charges because they've gained all this energy, but it causes them to do stuff like they're disarmed, they're weakened, and exhausted. Electrified's bad. So we've got cold. So basically you can be chilled, which slows you down and decreases your stats, and then you can be frozen, which is much worse. There's one more elemental one that's slower in the stack, but they're slowed, so you can get slowed. Maybe you shoot someone in the ankle or something like that, they slow them down. And different skills will play off of these conditions. So if you want to like slit someone's throat, The condition might be they need to be slowed times 2, so 2 stacks is slowed, which means their speed is 0. So they're basically like they can't move, so you can just like walk up and cut them. Impaired is reducing people's accuracy, and so if you're fighting someone who uses a lot of range skills, you're going to want to impair them so that it's much harder for them to perform. You can get disarmed. There are skills where they just grab your weapon, different stuff like that. Like electrified, when you get electrified, you drop your weapon, and on your turn you can't use your weapon array unless you pay the required stats to pick up your weapon. There's one missing from here. It must be somewhere else in the thing. But there's fire. There's the fire one. So you can be flammable or you can be on fire. And yeah, so there's all these things that help build the story and that you can apply to people to weaken them. If there's a really tough boss, you want to focus on lowering their stats with weakening them and slowing them down, and you can try and disarm them. Stack bleeding poison and all this kind of stuff. There's a lot of ways you can approach to weakening someone and killing them on top of your regular skills. So yeah, I find that adds a lot of depth and a lot of theme to what's happening. It allows you to tell a story. So if you're like weakened, slowed, and disarmed, like you've been beaten up and your weapon's been kicked aside and you're like, and you're bleeding and yeah, stuff like that. So I really like the condition cards, and I think they're a lot of fun. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you taking the time to learn about how the combat works. Hope you find it exciting and interesting, and I'll talk to you next time.